Hello and welcome to another podcast from the Flower of Light Mystery School. And I'm joined again today by Christine.
Hello, good afternoon.
And Charlotte.
Hello.
And I suppose in alignment with the Lion's Gate, I just want to talk about Ireland and, my usual topic, Egypt. And the connection, just to, and bring in the kind of connection with the Lion's Gate as well. So, I just want to talk about the Emerald Tablets, which are, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Anyone who hasn't heard of them, if you want to just look them up, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. And, sometimes things really are that obvious, They got the name, the Emerald Tablets, because they originated in the Emerald Isle.
Uh-huh.
And what I want to say is that, in truth, it's a universal wisdom. The knowledge contained in the Emerald Tablets, it's a universal wisdom. So, to say that they originated in Ireland is a misnomer in a way. It is and it isn't at the same time. It's a paradox. It's of universal wisdom what's contained in the Emerald Tablets, but at the same time, they did originate in this present cycle, if you like, from Ireland. So, when we go back to where we were talking about Atlantis, Ireland, and how when Atlantis fell, all the knowledge and wisdom came out from that centre point, because Atlantis, Ireland, was a global civilization, of course. It was a global level of consciousness and level of advancement and technology, which existed globally. But there was a centre point, and the centre point at that time was Ireland, and specifically the Boyne Valley, or Meath, as they would, Meath and Westmeath. Well, it's the compilation of the Meath and Westmeath. It was one place. It wasn't divided back in ancient time.
Yeah, it was a province named by itself.
Yeah, Meath.
Yeah. M-I-D-E.
And I've spoken before how Ireland was divided in Upper and Lower, the same as Egypt. The ratio of division between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland is very similar to the ratio of division between Upper and Lower Egypt. And the connecting point being Memphis in Egypt, meaning middle.
Yeah.
And Meath in Ireland, meaning middle.
Ah.
So geographically, kind of, yeah.
Wow. And also Meath was the mythical fifth province, because all the provinces were two
elements.
Elements, yeah. So it was ether.
The Meath related to ether, yeah. So that was out of physical manifestation, out of 3D.
Yeah.
The ether is the energy, if you like, in energy form.
Yeah.
And so, while the Emerald Tablets contain universal knowledge that applies to all the dimensions, if you like, beyond the physical, they did originate in Ireland in the sense that it was at the fall of Atlantis that knowledge was taken out of Ireland, and of course was called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. So, it's evidenced, and I've probably mentioned it before in other podcasts, but it is the evidence of the arrival, if you like, of Thoth and those who travelled with him into Egypt is documented. And it's documented on the walls of a temple called Edfu Temple. And that tells a couple of stories. I've spoke about this before in different podcasts, but Edfu Temple, each temple in Egypt, and in fact each sacred site, is like a chapter in a book. And so when you've, been in all the temples and sites and you've decoded or integrated the information, then you've read the book, if you like. And so the part of the information that Edfu Temple talks about is the 7 sages, or the 7 mound builders. And it talks about how they came from their previous homeland, which had been destroyed by water, by flood. It also tells the story of Zep Tepi, which is, Zep Tepi means the first time. And it also tells the story of the law of temple building, which states that no temple can be built only unless it's placed on a mound that was laid out in Zep Tepi and the first time. So Zep Tepi states that Zep Tepi talks about the time when the mound builders came into Egypt, and they laid out a plan. What they were doing was they were marking the new centre of the earth, because what happened in the fall of Atlantis was that what had been the centre, not just the geographical centre, but the centre of knowledge and wisdom, where, let's say, the most advanced masters would be geographically, was Ireland. But when that fell, then those masters and wisdom keepers went out all around the world, and they set up mystery schools all around the world. And those mystery schools then later evolved to become, well, I don't think evolved is the right word, devolved to become universities. And all the universities we have around the world were originally set up by these masters of knowledge, and originally began life as mystery schools, and over time became what we now know as universities. University, you know, so it's the
okay.
There's a hint in the title.
In the title, yeah.
Yeah. And as I said, you know, the whole story is mentioned in Edfu Temple, where it talks about how those 7 sages came into Egypt, and they were looking to establish the centre of the earth after the cataclysmic events. And so the new centre that they established, and that's why they had gone into Egypt, was in Egypt. And if you were to look at the landmass of the earth, the Great Pyramid marks the exact centre of the earth's landmass. And the 0-degree meridian line runs directly through the Great Pyramid and cuts right through the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber. So the Great Pyramid marks exactly, there's a quote in the Bible that says, there's an altar to the Lord in the land of Egypt, and it's on the border, it's in the middle and on the border thereof. And a lot of people, you know, it's been a mystery over the years, how can something be in the middle of something and on the border at the same time?
Yeah.
Well, the Great Pyramid is on the border of Upper and Lower Egypt. And it's in the middle of the centre of the earth. So it effectively is the one structure on earth that's on the border of something and in the middle of something at the same time.
Yeah.
So it was the Great Pyramid they were talking about, the altar to the Lord in Egypt. And so it tells the story of how the 7 sages came out of the land that had been devastated by water.
Yeah.
How they had arrived in Egypt, and how they had created, the time that they arrived in Egypt was known as Zep-Tepi.
Yeah.
And what they did when they got there, which was they created a master plan, if you like,
Yeah.
to find the new centre of the earth, which was Giza, and upon which a mound was created. As I said, they were also known as the mound builders. And it was from this centre of the earth, down along the Nile, and of course all over the earth, they began to create mounds. And I mentioned that there's another body of knowledge on the walls in Edfu Temple, and that is the law of temple building, which says that no temple can be built only on top of one of these mounds.
Yeah, mound, yeah.
And if you were to do ground penetrating radar on the temples and even the Great Pyramid itself, they all have mounds underneath them.
Yeah.
So these mounds were extremely important. And when I say mounds, I'm talking about obviously places like
Newgrange and places like that, or
yeah, like Newgrange and you know, all the mounds that we have around the Boyne Valley and really all around Ireland, and in fact all around the world, because they're found everywhere.
Yeah.
All around the world, those mounds. The Native American. China, everywhere. In fact, it's quite easy to see how a mound evolves into a pyramid.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about male and female energy, the mound relates to female energy, obviously. And the pyramid shape relates to male energy. And interestingly enough, the hieroglyph for Sirius is a mound.
That's right.
A pyramid and a 5-pointed star.
Yeah.
And in Egypt, the hieroglyph, the 5-pointed star, represented Sirius in part, because it made up part of the Sirius hieroglyph. But it also, the 5-pointed star represented the duat.
Oh, okay.
And the duat was most closely described. The duat was where consciousness or the soul is or goes after it's died, but also before it's born. I mean, people talk about after death, you know, life after death, but they don't talk about life before birth.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And so where we come from and where we go to is the same place, if you know what I mean. They're not two separate places, you know.
Yeah.
So the duat describes that place, if you like.
Yeah.
You know, not in physical.
Yeah, not in physical, yeah.
And so, you can see how the hieroglyph for Sirius in itself connects Ireland and Egypt. Yeah. Because Ireland is, of course, associated with mounds.
Yes.
Egypt is associated with pyramids.
And both are associated with people.
And the word duat, in fact, is in terms of D and T. They're interchangeable, D's and T's. So it can be duat and tuat. So tuat is like twat a day. Yeah. Twat a day down.
Yeah, exactly. The shining ones.
Thoth is known by many names. Tuat is one of his names.
That's right.
And interestingly enough, Toot Day means Thoth's crossing.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yes.
And if you think of the Tuatha, the Tuatha Dan, because the Dan or Danan word was added later on. Originally, they were the Tuatha.
Yeah, because Dan is more
Irish,
like
Tuatha,
one of the lost 12 tribes in Israel. One of the children, Dan, of
the 12 sons of
Moses?
Jacob.
Jacob's, that's what I was going to say most.
Which became Israel.
That's right.
And so that's interesting because it was when Jacob laid his head on the stone that he was brought up the 7-rung ladder. He had a conversation with God and came back down the ladder and became known as Israel. God renamed him Israel. Yeah. So that's like a death and rebirth story embedded in that mythology. Yeah. Jacob's ladder. And Jacob then becomes Israel.
Yeah, and it's another one of those 7 sevens.
Yeah, because it's related to the
7 days of the week, 7. Yeah,
it's related to the 7 chakras.
That's it. Chakras.
And then he falls asleep on the
dimensions.
Stone.
He falls very. Thank you, Charlotte. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It just went out of my head.
Yeah.
The stone that Jacob lay his head on, was called the Stone of Destiny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ireland was known as Inishfall. Inishfall means the island of destiny.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And Ireland was known as the island of destiny because the Leah Fall, which is the stone of destiny, was brought to Ireland. And the stone of destiny is, of course, the stone that Jacob laid his head on.
Mm-hmm. And would that, just for people listening, that connects it to Tlacta, because supposedly, was she the one that brought the stone with her from Israel?
Teotefi.
It was Teotefi, okay, sorry.
Luxor, it would be connecting with Antara.
Yes.
But that's where the Leah Fall, they say, it's not. The stone that's at Tara now is not the Leah Fall.
No, I don't think it is either, no.
No, it's not. But it was originally there.
Yeah.
It would have been originally there.
Well, there was like 9 or 12 standing stones on Tara.
Yeah.
And there's also the Stone of Stone.
The talking stones. And
which is under the coronation seat for the British Royal Crown.
Well, of course, there's an old mythology that says that there were 2 stones at Tara that asked you questions. And you couldn't gain entrance until you could answer the questions that the stones asked you,
Well, isn't that interesting? Stones. Because that reminds me of the riddle of the Sphinx at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's to do with the Lion's Gate as well.
That's what I thought.
So maybe for people who don't know, I mean, the Lion's Gate is actually an energetic or consciousness, same thing really, I suppose, portal that is more easily accessible. It's not not accessible at any other time of the year. It's just more easily accessible.
Yeah, because of all the the planets, the alignments, astrologically, it magnifies the energy easier for people. Yeah.
So, for example, for the Lion's Gate, it's to do with the alignment of Sirius and our Earth and Orion in relation to the 3 pyramids at Giza.
Yes.
But the interesting thing about Sirius was very important. Well, it's obviously all the stars are important, but in terms of how in ancient Egypt they calculated cycles of time, Sirius was very important because in ancient Egypt they ran 3 calendars. A solar calendar that went by the sun and the revolutions of the Earth around the sun. A lunar calendar, which obviously went by the phases of the moon. And a Sothic calendar, which went according to the cycle of Sirius.
Wow.
And what they did was they ran those 3 calendars concurrently at the same time. And so that led them to be able to have a calendar that had 10 days a week, 3 weeks in a month, 360 days in a year.
So no pesky extra 5.
There was no pesky extra days. There was no pesky extra 5 1/4 days. And embedded in the mythology of ancient Egypt is how Thoth played dice with the moon. And he won 72nd part of the light of the sun and gave it to the moon.
Oh.
That's a cool story.
It's a cool story, and
that
what it's
from?
to do with the calendars.
Wow.
Because this is one of the things that's very important, and is totally connected to what I'm talking about, is how our perception of time has been changed, if you like.
Altered.
Yes.
And how that was done was in this present cycle. It was back in the time of, and again I've spoke about this before, the Amun priesthood in Luxor and Karnak Temple.
Yes.
And I'm not going to get into it too much, but
But can I just go hiss?
one of the things that the masters of the mystery schools were known for was they were called followers of Horus. Now Horus was another name for the sun, if you like. But one of the things that in our kind of more modern time we don't consider is that every star you see in the sky is a sun. There's no difference between. There's a slight difference between a sun and a star in that not every star has planets revolving around them. But everything considered a sun would have planets revolving around them. So that's really the only difference. I mean, a star and a sun are the same thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all the points of light you see out there are suns, and a lot of them have planets revolving around them.
Yeah.
So when we say Horus meaning the sun, you could also equally say Horus meaning the stars.
Yeah.
Because in the ancient mind like this, they would not have made a difference between suns and stars, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So the followers of Horus, you could say, were the star walkers or the followers of the stars.
Star walkers.
Yeah, star walkers. I mean, there's hieroglyphs in Egypt where they talk about the star walkers.
Yeah.
And they travel through on boats of millions of years.
Solar boats. Yeah.
In the Ramesseum, the whole story told in the Ramesseum is the boat of millions of years. So the followers of Horus were also, of course, the wisdom, different names for different times and for the same people, I suppose. But they were the wisdom keepers. We'll just call them the wisdom keepers or the masters of the mystery schools. And what they would do is they would literally follow the stars.
Yeah.
So a huge part of the Atlantean knowledge was keeping the portals between the earth and the
cosmos.
stars,
Yeah,
or the universe or the cosmos or the higher dimensions open.
Yes.
And so that's what the masters of the mystery schools would do, and they did that by, as I mentioned, when they first left Atlantis, Ireland, and went out around the world, they had to recreate the entire star map on the ground.
Right.
Which is the story that's told in Zep-Tepi.
Right.
Where they came into Egypt, they established where the centre of the earth was because it had been the earth had been knocked off axis, if you like.
That's where your extra days came from.
Exactly. That's
shifted.
where the extra days came from. And because the earth had been knocked off axis, then the geographical centre was not the same as it had been.
Yeah.
So it had shifted. So they had to find a new centre. So previous to the fall, it was in Ireland. After that, it was located then at Egypt. So you can see, I mentioned earlier, Ireland was the female energy. Ireland's also the heart chakra of the earth. Ireland and England.
The colour gives it away.
Yeah.
The verdant green.
The emerald isle, yeah. And if you can see how in the fall of man, and it's called the fall of man because it's our male energy that fell into the illusion.
Yeah, that's it.
The feminine energy never fell. Right. The feminine energy still knows it's the creator. It's still connected to creator consciousness. It's not, your feminine energy is not in this 3D world at all.
Yeah.
It's only your masculine energy that's in the 3D. And so that's why it's called the fall of man. Because it was our masculine energy that fell, not the feminine. And the feminine is what keeps us connected, you see.
Yeah. Feminine's always on, always recording.
Yeah, your feminine energy is your subconscious, is your
Yes.
dreaming, is your creative energy. It's it's your intuitive, it's your inner voice, your inner teacher, your higher self, the intelligence of your heart. Whereas your masculine energy is the energy that you're in from the minute you open your eyes.
That's right.
In the third dimension.
It's literally
now you can be more,
analyzing.
you can be in more feminine energy if you're drawing or listening to classical music.
But
or
you're
that
still
kind
not
thing.
out of your male.
But you're still in your male energy predominantly. Once you're awake and aware in the third dimension, you're in your male energy.
Well, I mean, when people think of it, like you need to organize your day, you need to make lists, you need to analyze what's coming at you.
Yeah,
it's
all
literally
analyzing, and labeling and
your male energy is your survival kit for the 3D.
Yeah,
because your higher stuff is not, it's like you're saying, it's symbols, it's colors, it's feelings.
Exactly, yeah. It's not how your male energy interprets information entirely differently to your female energy.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And it'll only interpret it to a certain level. Your masculine energy interprets the third dimensional information, if you
That's
like.
what I'm saying. The masculine energy is for the 3D.
Whereas your feminine energy is omnidimensional.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the word, omnidimensional.
Completely connected to source. Never left source. Never left source. And it knows it, and that's why building the bridge between the two is so important. So you can see how in the fall of what we call man, or the fall of Atlantis, which happened at the time when Ireland would have been the centre. So Ireland was very feminine, and we talk about how it was a matriarchal society. So we can see visually, if you like, in how the centre moved from Ireland, which was feminine, to Egypt. The new centre was now founded in Egypt.
Yes.
Which is masculine.
Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, look at the sites in Egypt. The pyramids, the temples, they're all like pyramid shape, rectangle.
Yeah, boxes,
squares,
rectangles.
Very measured and
they're
straight
all
lines.
masculine. Whereas in Ireland, it's all circles.
It's all soft.
Mounds, spirals. So it's, again, as we said, feminine. So we can, in that story, if you like, not that it's a story, but in that mythology is how we went from feminine energy to masculine energy. How it's telling us in the story.
Yeah, and it was very abrupt as well.
Yeah, it's telling us in the story.
It wasn't any like slow fall. It was like boom.
Well, so we're told it was very abrupt. It was almost overnight, you know. And the geographical centre at the time, I should mention this, would have been Ireland and England. So those land masses would have been connected.
Yes.
Yeah,
And they also would have been connected to Northern Europe,
Yeah.
you know. So Ireland wouldn't have existed as an island as it does now.
That's it. Yeah.
When it would have been Atlantis.
Yeah.
It was a big landmass, and Ireland was connected to England. Ireland and England were connected to the Northern European countries.
Doggerland, it's all underwater
And they were connected to the other, like, Scandinavian countries.
That's what I think as well, yeah.
And when you can see how all the land masses that still exist, if you look on Google Earth, underneath, you can see underneath England and Ireland, there's still huge land masses that connect them. Ireland and England are just the bits that are sticking up over the water now.
But it's so funny. Part of the like mythology of Ireland is that it's very clannish. It's very family orientated. It's very nurturing. It's very like having a good time, losing of time, because it's more feminine in its energy.
Oh yeah, Ireland's very feminine. That's why we're known for singing and dancing and all that kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
the crack.
And that's how Irish people carry on information as well, as in song and dance.
That's it.
You know.
Well, that's the lineage of the bard.
Yeah, and it is still a very feminine
Tradition.
It is, yeah.
And also
still.
nothing. That's another thing about being a bard. Nothing was written down.
No,
it was
it all had
memorized.
to be remembered. Yeah,
it was oral.
Well, there's
history.
a reason for that.
Oh yeah,
Because anything that's written down can be changed.
that's it. Tampered
Can be destroyed. You know. And the point is, if you are truly in your feminine energy, your memory, you'll be able to remember it, because your feminine energy does not forget anything.
Yeah, that's right.
And so that's another part of the training.
That's it.
Of the mystery school initiate was to remember, you know. And that was an interesting point as well, Christine, about, you know, things having to be remembered, because it's more or less the same story as is told in the Tower of Babel and the confusion of the languages. So, I mean, the original language would have been our ability to telepathically communicate.
Ah, okay.
You know, so language, all language,
Was
is
debased.
is debased. Yeah, is a lower form of communication. So, the story of the Tower of Babel, even though I've mentioned how it's discussing the Gaelic language, but I'm not going to get into that because that's another podcast. But
We will in future.
the original language would have been telepathic, and so all spoken language and written language is a degradation.
Yeah, a lower.
So that was another reason why you would have to remember everything rather than put it down into language. Because when you're remembering things, you're remembering them in symbol form.
Yeah.
You're remembering the emotion and the feeling. When you bring something into the written language and the written word, all you're getting is the actual words. You've got to translate the emotion, the feeling, and the symbol of the idea and thought in your mind into words.
Like mnemonics.
Well, the word is only a representation of what you're talking about.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
I mean, a word is a representation of an idea, a feeling, an emotion, and it doesn't represent it.
It just.
It doesn't. It can kind of closely approximate it to a degree, if you're writing a story or something.
Yeah.
But it still doesn't fully express what you're feeling and thinking.
Yeah.
You can give a person an inkling, but you can't fully transmit it to them.
Well, and the whole thing is telepathy.
You know, if you come in really excited about something,
Yeah.
and you're telling somebody else, or even a funny story you're telling somebody else, the other person might laugh politely or be a bit excited for you, but they're not feeling what you're feeling
Exactly.
because they can't tap into
That energy.
Do you know what I mean?
reality.
Yeah.
And it's the same with language. Language is an expression of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and ideas. So when you translate it into words, you're immediately collapsing the quantum realm.
Yeah, you're
Do you know what I mean?
you're lowering the whole thing
You're bringing the what as a wave.
to a particle.
You're bringing it into a frozen
Yeah.
ice cube.
That's it. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because that's the whole thing about the Lions Gate, the portal, the new energy coming in,
Yeah.
is that if everyone's frequencies have risen, right, and they've balanced their male and female energy, there'll be a whole lot more telepathy going on. You know? And that telepathy will be coming across the morphogenic fields of the Earth and the cosmos because they'll be in alignment.
That was the idea of the, the 7 sages that left Atlantis
Yeah.
and went into Egypt. That was the point you're making, Christine. It's a
Yeah.
good point because that was the map, as I said, that they carried with them, the star map, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And the mounds that they were directing the people to place temples on
Yeah.
were, you could say, star maps, as we mentioned. And so the mounds on the ground were depictions. No, that's not the right word I'm looking for. Were
Reflections.
reflections, yeah. Reflections of particular stars above.
Yeah, like mirror
And
images.
Exactly. And when you get a cluster of mounds,
Yeah.
they're representative of constellations.
Yeah.
Or a cluster of temples in one area, or even pyramids. A cluster of pyramids in one area
Well, it kind of reminds me
is
right
representative
now
of constellations. So they were bringing the heaven to earth.
That's it.
you
That
like.
the law of correspondence, like together. No, I was thinking of Nouth. I don't know if people know about that, but Ireland also has, the largest amount of Neolithic art in the entire
in
Europe
Nouth alone. Yeah.
In other words, in all of Europe, they have the most decorated giant stones. But around Nouth are star maps and everything all around the bottom of the reconstructed
stones.
mound. I don't know if it's the right way it was built, but the way that they had modernly rebuilt the mound, you can see all the stones, and they are like you were saying, symbols that will go right into your right brain. So if you're connected to it, you'll get the rebirthing information just by looking at it.
Exactly. So the idea of receiving information through symbols is the feminine.
That's it.
Because your feminine dreams in symbols. So you dream in symbols. You think in, you don't actually think in language in terms of,
It's right. Your thoughts are abstract.
Yeah.
You're not just like.
Yeah.
It's not. I think I've heard some people have like a running dialogue in their head, but it won't always just be that. I would imagine. But I don't know.
No.
Most people's dreams are symbolic, and that's why you kind of need them interpreted. Even if you dream of something that's very 3D, it won't really just mean itself.
No.
The definition of a symbol is that it represents something else. I mean, you could see a cup in a dream, but it's not just representing itself. A symbol always represents something else. Itself, but something else.
Well, even like in the sacred geometry that we just did our class on,
yeah.
A symbol represents an entire body of knowledge.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's like one
Libraries.
symbol could represent, exactly, an entire
Libraries of
library.
knowledge.
Like sacred geometry could be, you look at one sophisticated sacred geometry symbol and you are absorbing the same amount of information in the Library of Alexandria. Mm-hmm. But now you have to unpack it.
That's it. So I just wanted to talk about, how this all connects with, how Ireland and Egypt is all connecting, because, Ireland and Egypt, as I mentioned in the fall of Atlantis and the story, really, it is Ireland and Egypt that is the centre of this fall of Atlantis and the fall of man's story.
Okay.
Because, as I said, it went from the female, which is representative of Ireland and the circles and the mounds, to Egypt, which is representative of their very male structures. And then if you look at what the symbol for Sirius, the hieroglyph for Sirius in ancient Egypt is a pyramid, a mound, and a 5-pointed star. So why am I talking about Sirius? Because Sirius is to do with the Lion's Gate.
Okay.
Because it's the alignment of Sirius, Earth, and the 3 stars in Orion's belt that signify the opening of the Lion's Gate portal. Now, I mentioned in ancient Egypt that the calendars that they ran were lunar, solar, and Sothic, and that the wisdom keepers, the masters of the mystery schools, literally located themselves according to the stars.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, in Egypt, for example, they chose the star Sirius to mark their location, if you like. So the wisdom keepers of the mystery schools, for example, were in the temple. I'm just giving you this example of how it was finally, the cosmic order was finally broken.
Oh, yes.
By this time in ancient Egypt, those that were wisdom keepers, I'm not saying the wisdom keepers themselves, possibly them as well, but the knowledge had become degraded. Because don't forget, it was the fall of man. And this is according to the cycle, the processional cycle as well.
Right.
Consciousness falls according to the processional cycle. The further away that we get from the central sun, or the light of the central sun, if you like. So it's called often galactic day and galactic night.
Yeah.
So consciousness naturally falls. It's the rise and fall of consciousness on Earth is a natural cycle.
Does that have anything to do with the age, like age of Aquarius and age of Pisces?
Yeah. The age of Aquarius now will be 1,000 or more years of enlightenment, because we're directly in line with the light of the galactic centre. And we've just gone from Pisces into Aquarius and beginning a whole new 25,920 year cycle.
Yeah, and that was December.
But the most amount of that cycle we spend, we're falling into dark. You know, we have 1,000 years approximately.
We're remembering everything.
1,000 golden years. They're called the golden years.
Yeah.
Where we come into the height of our consciousness, and after we pass through that 1,000-year window, it begins to fall away again. So it's a gradual fall until we hit the very base end of the cycle, and we're in the Iron Age.
Yeah.
The heavy, dense age, where the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
And then when we come out of the Dark Ages, we gradually make our way back up again to the 1,000-year.
It's a sine wave
period
so
of
we're
time.
we're going up now,
Yeah.
and then eventually we'll have to come down because it's a cycle.
Well, we're effectively we're in the time now of total awakening.
Yeah. So
Great.
we will
And the height
remember
of-
everything we forgot.
The highest consciousness, so we remember everything now. Now is time for us to wake up and remember everything.
As a
And that's
whole?
another reason for today's podcast today, is to call all those wisdom keepers from around the world
That's true. Yeah, exactly.
to
So
wake up and remember, because now is the time.
yeah. So calling all wisdom keepers.
Yeah,
from
and if you
Ireland
can't
and
physically
Egypt and
come
around
back to
the world.
Ireland,
Yeah.
then we want you to connect
Connect.
your energy with the energy of Ireland, because there's millions of Irish people all around the world
Yes.
Yeah.
directly who have left Ireland.
Oh, they have the cellular DNA.
Or their descendants, children of parents who've left Ireland in America, all over the world. So it's all you wisdom keepers out there who are waking up now. You all know who you are, and we want you to either connect your energy to Ireland or to come back to Ireland, because it's Ireland
needed.
that's Atlantis. Ireland is awake now.
Yeah. It is awake, and it is in your heart chakra that you must be in this time period. So through your heart chakra, the intelligence of your heart chakra, remember your cellular DNA and connect.
Yeah. And it is a global heart activation as well, as we mentioned. I did a video recently there about a site in Ireland called Collecta. It's in Athboy in County Meath, and I spoke about how it's to do with the weighing of the heart, which is the information that's in the Book of Coming Forth by Light. And you know, the Book of Coming Forth by Light, actually the Egyptologists renamed it the Book of the Dead, but it contains a couple of things. They're not books at all. They're written on pyramids, on walls of temples, on papyrus,
Yeah.
and on inside coffins.
Yeah, yeah. Scrolls.
And
not
on
like
the
a
walls.
physical book.
No, it's not. And on the walls of the tombs in Egypt. So it's not a physical book, no. And it's a compilation of a few different things. There's the Book of the Dead. There's the Book of the Yam Duat, the Book of the Gates.
Yes.
There's a few different, but when I say the Book of Coming Forth by Light, I'm talking about
encompasses-
all of those
Yeah, and in the
books together,
book of-
because they are all one, really, if you know what I mean. They're
it's
just,
like chapters in a book.
yeah, they're
But
named
when
different
when you're in
things.
the darkness, which everybody is now, but the light is returning, you need keys, and you need to know the answers to the questions. So if you're attracted to Egypt, you're attracted to Ireland, you've already got the keys and the answers to the question. You just have to connect to the energy.
Yeah. And an interesting thing that I'm talking about Collecta is that Collecta is, as I mentioned in that video that I did there just recently, Collecta is known as, the place of the first time of Halloween.
Yeah.
It's the first, and that's one of the things I discussed in that video, is that the festival that we now know today as Halloween originates in this site of Collecta in Athboy. And it's interesting because Zeptepi, the word Zeptepi means first time. But the word Collecta, or it's spelled kind of Chaktu in Nahal, I forget how to pronounce it.
Nahuatl?
Language, it's to do with the Nahuatl language, the Aztec, Mayan,
Central
American language. The word Collecta means place of the first time.
So
Yeah.
that's
I think
really
there's
good validation.
A province in central Mexico called Tlaxcala.
Yeah.
Or forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong.
No. But that's also
similar, very
it's
similar.
interesting because it says that the emerald tablets were brought to.
It does, to the Yucatan Peninsula.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so much like ancient pyramids over in Mexico. The Mayans
Not to
and
mention the
Aztecs.
entire sunken city of Cuba with giant pyramids and
Yeah, and so those Atlanteans that
working
left,
crystals.
that went out from Ireland, you can see their mark everywhere around the world.
The Druids, right?
The Druids, yeah.
The Druids reseeding the knowledge around the world after the cataclysm.
The ancient civilizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
For us, the timelines have just been screwed up. So, but it doesn't matter now. We're going to remember.
the cosmic order was broken, let's say, back
Yes.
in Luxor Temple and Karnak Temple by those that had, for one reason or another, it was a natural, maybe either a natural fall in their own level of consciousness, and therefore they became corrupt
Yes, exactly.
and degraded. I would say that's probably most closely what happened.
Yeah.
And so, the natural fall in consciousness then leads you into the temptation of holding the knowledge for yourself. I can earn money out of this. I can get control by knowing this. Well, that's a natural fall of consciousness. A higher consciousness wouldn't think that way because it's a unity consciousness.
Yes.
So it would naturally want to share, want to elevate everybody. But as the consciousness fell, the idea of holding the information for yourself,
Oh yeah, and starting
getting control
all of these
over other
things
people.
like
I can make myself
taxation.
nice and comfortable and have the rest of the people working for me. All of this
That's it.
came into the psyche of the wisdom keepers, of those that...
And you're absolutely right. It was probably degraded, the degraded knowledge.
No,
that
that's my
the-
guess. I'm
the-
not saying
the-
that's...
the lights went to a certain level.
Yeah, I'm
and
guessing... I mean, I'm sure there was other reasons as well why the consciousness fell, but I think that would have been...
Well, the wisdom keepers would have been moving through all the temples, mirroring the cycles of nature cosmically, like the constellations and the stars, just like you said.
That's exactly what they were. They were star walkers on the ground. Don't forget, we said they created a mirror image of the stars.
Yeah.
On the ground. And it's good to point out at this point that it wasn't just any old area of the sky that they created on the ground.
No.
They created the area known as the Duat on the ground.
Oh, okay.
And that's the area where the souls who have reached immortality go. The land of the immortal.
Yes.
Or Tir na Nog.
Yeah.
And Tir na Nog actually means the
Where-
land of promise.
Yeah.
So the promised land.
Did it?
Yes, Tir na Nog means the land of promise. The land of the young, but another name for it. No, Tir na Nog means the land of the young.
Yeah.
But there's another name that means the land of promise.
Ah, well, yeah.
Which you've
or the
heard in your
promised
Bible,
land.
the promised land.
There's a couple of names for Tir.
The land of milk and honey?
Yeah.
Oh.
So it was called
The land of milk and honey as well, yeah. There's a couple of Irish names though.
Yeah.
But there's an
Yeah,
Irish
it's
name
like-
that means land of promise. Or promised land, if you like. The promised land of the exodus of Moses. And of course we know Moses, aka, was Akhenaten.
Right. Because Moses is a title, not a name.
Moses is a title. The same as Mary is a title.
That's right.
Mary in ancient Egypt was not a name like the way we use it today.
No.
Mary, like spelled, for example, it wouldn't have spelled that way because it was in ancient Egypt, but M-E-R-I, Mary,
Yes.
like Mary Magdalene. Mary meant a female
High
master of the mystery schools.
Exactly.
Moses was a name that was used by a person who lost the ability to use their own name. So for whatever reason, if a person was, in Akhenaten's case, he couldn't use his name as Pharaoh anymore
That's right.
because he wasn't. So he had to use another name. So Moses was a name that was used when you couldn't use your own name. It was like an alias that you would take on.
But people don't even know that he was.
And it's Mos, and the word means, sorry Christine, the word
that's
means, Mos means the heir to something.
Yeah.
So the name Tutmos and it's only in the 18th dynasty in Egypt that you have the names Thutmose.
Mm-hmm.
But the name Thutmose means the heir to the wisdom of Thoth,
That's right.
because Tut in that is Thoth. But what I was talking about, the T's and the D's being interchangeable.
Yeah.
I talk about how the Atlantean tribes from Ireland went into Egypt and met with Thutmose III. And Thutmose III met the Atlantean tribes in Karnak and Luxor Temple. Now, why did he meet? Like, the Atlantean tribes were called in because of this very thing I just spoke about. Because of how the wisdom keepers were breaking the cosmic order.
Yes.
Not all of them, obviously. You know, there was some that was aware that this was happening. And that lineage was the lineage of Akhenaten. Those who came back into Ireland thousands of years later.
Yeah.
Those ones who were called in?
Well, let's put it this way. In the fall of Atlantis, nobody knows exactly approximately the time frame, you know, for
That's
that
right.
in linear time. But I'm going to say approximately 10,000 years. 10,500 years. No, don't say hang me on that time, because it could
Don't
be
be in your male
30,000
energy.
years. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
It could be even shorter than that. Like,
Yeah.
this is linear time we're talking about here,
That's
you
it.
know, and a history that's like, so let's just
That's
say
the
about 10 and a half, 11,
obfuscated.
12,000 years, approximately half a cycle ago. So we'll say approximately 13,000 years ago. We're talking about the fall of Atlantis, yeah? And I'm saying that the people from Ireland, England, Northern Europe, that would have been all one landmass called Atlantis, and the centre of it would be in Ireland. Okay? And I'm saying that those people, when whatever happened that caused the cataclysm, when those people went out around the world, and I'm not saying they only went to Egypt, they went all around the world, but those that went to Egypt went there because Egypt was now the new centre of the landmass of the earth.
Yes.
Okay? But fast forward then thousands of years into the future and to the time of when Akhenaten was born.
Okay.
His lineage all the way down along were of those original Irish Atlanteans that left 13,000 years ago and went
that
into
makes sense.
Egypt. So fast forward, and Thutmose III and Akhenaten and Nefertiti and Tutankhamun and Meriaten, and they were all the descendants of the original people, the Irish Atlanteans that went in to Egypt.
Yes. And they had red hair and blue eyes.
Yeah. So that's the reason why the Atlantean tribes met with Thutmose III, because he was their lineage. He was one of the Irish who had come out of Ireland in the fall of Atlantis, gone to Egypt, and he was the descendants of those who had founded the centre of the earth, created the blueprint of all the mounds. You see. So the Atlantean tribes met Thutmose III when they realised that other members of the Wisdom Keepers were degrading the information and using it to control people. So they were called in to Egypt to do something about it. So, as I said, they met with Thutmose III because he was their ancestor.
That's right.
You know, you might as well say they were cousins if you like.
Yeah.
And he left the book in his tomb.
Yeah, yeah.
We went there.
Oh.
Now you remember where we were?
Yeah.
Shannon?
Thutmose III was the tomb in the Valley of the
Gosh,
Kings
yeah,
that you
yeah,
have to
yeah.
climb up.
Down, down, down,
And
down.
then you go down.
Yeah,
And
like
then
Where
all
the
over
book
the
of
wall.
Coming Forth by Light is
exactly.
on the walls.
Thutmose III's tomb in the
I didn't
Valley of the
make that
Kings has
connection.
the only complete version of the book of Coming Forth by Light, or the book, as they call it, the Book of the Dead, or the Book of the Amduat and the Book of the Gates. He has the complete scenes from all the books in Thutmose III's tomb. So when Thutmose III was met, that's what they were. The Atlantean tribes were discussing what was happening, and what was happening was the Wisdom Keepers had broken the cosmic order, as we mentioned, and they did it in such a way that they changed the calendars. And
Yeah, so they messed with time.
they messed with time. They messed with the people's notions of time.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a calendar that's 360 days, okay, 360 is a complete circle.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's no 5 1/4 extra added, like a quarter of a day doesn't exist. I mean, it's do you know what I mean? So if you consider that the calendars, the 3 calendars they had, the Celtic calendar, the lunar calendar, and the solar calendar, all running together, meant that, now it's too complicated to get into, and I'm not going to talk about it in this podcast, but the whole calendar, all those 3 calendars recalibrated themselves every 1,460 years.
Okay.
So there was never a need to add any leap years
Right.
or do anything like that. Just let the calendars run and they will recalibrate. They'll all start a new cycle every 1,460 years. It was called the Celtic cycle. So Sirius was very important in the keeping of the cosmic order.
Right.
And it was these wisdom keepers, well, we can't call them wisdom keepers, when they decided to use the knowledge against people. So these who now became priests,
I was
the
just saying,
Amun
can we call them
priesthood,
corrupt priests?
yeah. So they're now corrupt priests, not wisdom keepers. But their job had originally been that. So these corrupt priests now broke the cosmic order by stopping moving, following the stars. So I'll give you an example. In ancient Egypt, the wisdom keepers would look at the star and they picked the star Sirius. And when Sirius was rising and falling in the area of Luxor, where the temples of Luxor and Karnak are, which is approximately midway in Egypt.
Right.
As long as Sirius was rising and falling, because Sirius goes out of view every year for 72
That means
days.
under the horizon line.
Yeah, it goes under the horizon line.
To the duet.
So from the northern hemisphere, you can't see Sirius in the sky.
Yeah.
Yes.
It disappears, and so does Orion. But Sirius disappears for 72 days, okay? Now, the process of mummification was based on the 72 days that Sirius is below the horizon line.
Okay. Cool.
And when it rises again with the sun, it's called a heliacal rising.
That's right.
So, when Sirius stopped rising and falling at, or setting I should say, at Luxor, in the area of Luxor, which is about midway in Egypt, when Sirius then moved up along, because it would move up and down along the Nile as it rose and set. So when Sirius moved, say, further up along the Nile towards the north, say to Dendra and Abydos, what was meant to happen effectively was the priesthood, or the wisdom keepers, were meant to walk out of Luxor and Karnak and go to the area of Abydos and Dendra and stay there until the star moved again.
Yeah, physically inhabit the temple.
And when the star moved again further towards the north, say towards Cairo, the wisdom keepers would walk out of Abydos and Dendra, of that area, and follow the star to where it was now rising and setting. So in the whole story of the three wise men following the stars,
yeah, you see where that
that's
came
a
from.
kind of a degradation of this story.
The Magi, right? The
Magi. That's kind of a degradation of the story of what I'm telling you. So when it came time for the priests who had now become degraded in Luxor and Karnak to move because Sirius had moved, when it became time, they said no. We're not moving. We're staying where we are. So the star moved, but they didn't.
They stayed.
Now, anybody in the knowledge all over the earth, if they wanted to look for the wisdom keepers and know where they were, say they were in Egypt, they would look for the star. They would use different stars in different countries.
Yeah.
But if you went to Egypt, you would look for the star Sirius and find where is it rising and setting in what part of the country, and that's where you know where the wisdom keepers are. So they could always be found. They had a secret signal. The stars were always over their head of where they were.
Haha, there you
So
go.
anybody in the know would always find them.
Yeah.
In any part of the world, not just in Egypt.
Because it's navigation.
But when they broke the order, when they stopped following the stars, then it was broken. Nobody could know where they were. Their location was now not known by anybody. And not just that, they also broke the energetic connection
That's it.
between
That's most important.
heaven and earth. And when we say heaven and earth, or the earth and the stars, it doesn't just mean that. It means between higher dimensions and lower dimensions. It also means between your higher self and your lower self. Because once you break a connection, it has a knock-on effect of breaking all the other connections that are associated to it.
Yeah.
And that's what it means by breaking the cosmic order. It didn't just break the order, it broke people's ability to connect to their own higher self.
That's it.
It broke the knowledge and the ability for people to connect. So the idea of the Lyons-Gate portal is directly connected
Yeah.
with this
To reestablish
knowledge
this information.
and disinformation. And the portal itself that, opens up with this Lyons-Gate, if you like, carries with it this higher dimensional information and ability to connect. And it's almost like, the first time being referred to, like, as I mentioned, in Collecta. Like, Halloween is a time in the original Celtic, or, well, it's not Celtic, but in the original ancient Irish festival, or it would be done because it was a time when people could contact those who we consider have died or who are in another dimension.
The thinning of the veil.
And
Yeah,
it's
the thinning of the veil.
It's the new year as well.
And that's exactly what happens with the Lyons-Gate portal. Now, another reason why they chose the centre of the earth, and why the centre of the earth, and why the Sphinx, the Lyons-Gate, marks the centre of the earth as well, is that, and it discusses this in the Emerald Tablets, it tells that beneath the pyramids and the Sphinx is the flower of life and the flower of light.
That's it.
Now, the flower of life is a geometric pattern, as we know. And the flower of life carries information that will guide the initiate into regarding the third dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Going beyond that, it's called the flower of light.
Yes.
And the initiates were guided to access the flower of light, which cannot be done in your physical body.
No.
So the Lions Gate portal at the centre of the earth is guarded by the Sphinx, or a big cat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the energy, the Syrian energy, is feline energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's feline energy. Now, in order to open the portal as an initiate, first of all, it has to be done out of body. But second of all, the idea of the Sphinx is because there is a vibration that opens the portal.
Like the cat's purr.
And it's most closely associated to a cat's purr.
Yeah.
And anybody that has actually experienced this will know what I'm talking about. Because you have to match its vibration.
Yeah.
You have to have the ability in an out-of-body state to match the vibration of the Sphinx. That's part of the riddle of the Sphinx, if you like.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is an out-of-body thing. People think you can access the Hall of Records by climbing underneath the Giza Plateau.
But
You
no.
can't. It's an out-of-body thing. And apart from that, else, the Hall of Records exists below all sacred sites, not just
Yeah.
at Giza.
But would it be energetically, or would it actually be the?
Oh, it's
resolution
energetically. It's a crystalline template. That's
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not.
It's
like
not
a
nothing physical.
thing.
No, it's nothing physical.
Of course, yeah.
And you would never find it. And anyway, you won't find it yourself. There's always a way shower
Yes.
that will show you the way. But you open the portal yourself, but there'll be a way shower to show you where the crystalline template is. And that's known as the flower of light.
And does that have to do with the morphogenic fields?
Yeah.
And these
Yes,
plasma
it's for-
diamond grids that are now
Yes. Yeah.
broadcasting the higher frequency?
Yes, the flower of light is to do with the higher consciousness grids,
Yeah.
which are being broadcast from Sirius.
Yeah.
Sirius was always known as the spiritual sun, or the sun behind the sun.
Yeah.
Sirius, the star, physically is I don't know, it's way bigger than our sun.
Oh,
I don't know by how many.
it's
But
huge.
it's way bigger than our sun.
It's a binary.
And it was always known as the sun behind the sun. And as Christine pointed out there, it's in a binary relationship with our sun.
Yeah.
In other words, it shares information.
Oh,
And
okay.
it comes
And
closer to our sun and further away from our sun
the apogee and the
in
perigee.
in the cycle.
Wow.
So the Lion's Gate is to do with how Sirius is closer
Yeah.
So
to our
they're-
sun. It's in alignment with the Earth as we perceive it from the Earth's perspective. It
Yeah.
looks bigger. Sirius looks bigger. And it's
it's much
also
bigger.
the time when the three stars during the Lion's Gate. It's
Yeah.
also the time when the three stars
In
of
Orion's
Orion's belt align to the three pyramids of Giza. Now, in ancient Egypt, Sirius, the rising of Sirius marked the new year.
That's it.
So Sirius was associated with new cycles, new beginnings, with rebirth. Because when the new year began in Egypt, all the new growth started, all the new plants. The Nile
Also,
overflowed.
the flooding of the Nile as
The
well.
Nile overflowed, and Sirius heralded the signal that the Nile is going to overflow, because when Sirius rose again after having disappeared for 72 days below the horizon line, when it rose again, everybody knew, oh, it's coming into the flood season, which means everything is going to start growing again. All
Yeah, so
the
it's
plants.
rebirth.
So it's about rebirth.
Fertile.
Yeah,
Yeah, fertile.
new cycles.
Ideas.
Another interesting thing, Sirius is 8.7 light years away. Now, you might read some places 8.6 or whatever, but in the ancient mystery school, it's 8.7, and I go with that because it's encoded in the Great Pyramid, and that's the point I'm telling you. The Great Pyramid is created on a code of 8x7 and 8x8. And again, that's another bit of complicated thing to talk about, so it's not for this podcast, but what I'm trying to say is that the Great Pyramid is actually, among other things, it's many things, but as well as all the other things that it is,
Yeah.
it's also a stone representation of the star Sirius.
Okay.
Now, it's also a representation of the northern hemisphere of our Earth,
Yeah.
but it's also a representation of the star Sirius, in that the Great Pyramid doesn't have 4 faces, it has
No,
8.
It has 8. That's right.
8 faces.
Only can be seen aerially.
Yes, so there's a code of 8.7 written all
Yeah.
over the Great Pyramid, which is associated with the 8.7 light years
Serious.
that Sirius is away from us. Now, the whole idea of 8.7 as well is to do with the 7 seals. to do with the 7th chakra
Yeah.
and to do with the octave. The octave is a relationship of 7-8.
Yes.
And so has our chakra. Our chakra is a relationship of 7-8, because when you go beyond the crown chakra, you go into your 8th chakra, the star chakra, which exists outside your body.
Yeah. Wow.
When we are working with the 7, we're working with the ones that are inside our body, but we have chakra that exist outside our body, within our energy field, if you like.
Yeah.
And so
In your light body.
yeah,
And beyond.
and beyond, and you can work on the octave of 7-8.
Yeah.
So Sirius has to do with our light body, has to do with the Great Pyramid, and it's also among a lot of you know, the information like the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Essenes and all that kind of thing.
Copper scroll.
Yeah. So that energy, if anybody has any cats or are connected to cats, I know people who don't connect to cats think cats are very cold and not very emotional or loving, you know. But I know anybody out there who's connected with cats will be shouting now at this moment, going, what? Because cats are the most loving once you make a connection with them, you know. And of course, once you're loving to them, all things respond to love, you know.
Of course.
But from cats, the most, really, I'd say they're love wrapped in fur. Because that's the energy that cats give. That's it. Just love. And all they want to do is give love, and all they want to do is receive love. And that is the most closely description, if you like, of the energy of Syrians. If you think of Syrians or Syrian consciousness, the energy of Syrian consciousness is just pure love. They just want to give love and they just want to receive love. And cats would be Syrians because they stayed. A lot of them stayed. You know, they're represented in Egypt. Like, for example, anybody who's familiar with Egypt, they'll know, they call them a goddess, Sekhmet. I mean, you've seen the statue of Sekhmet when we went into Karnak Temple.
Yes.
So Sekhmet would be representative of that feline energy that was, and
Bastet?
yeah, and Christ consciousness, if you like.
Yeah.
The crystal levels of consciousness are the Syrian energy, if you like. And so, this Lionsgate portal, of course, being 2020 as well. You know, with our
like
2020 vision, if you like.
Exactly.
This Lionsgate portal, while they're all important, of course, you know, but this one is also connected to the one in 2012, if you like, as well.
Yeah.
It was a window, a period of time between 2012 and 2020, or 2021, if you like, you know. But this will be the last Lionsgate in that period of time.
Yeah.
Or that period of...
It's like a mirror 2020.
Well, it was known
image.
as the time of no time, if you like. It
Yeah,
was
exactly.
the time of going through our perception of the way we have seen time up to now, linear time. Because time in itself doesn't exist. It's a mental construct, and that's another podcast to get into. It's a lot to talk about. But the idea of how we think in terms of time, weeks, days, weeks, months, years, they're very small increments of time. We don't think in terms of immortality.
Yes.
And everlasting, and, you know, things being immortal.
Cycles.
In third dimensional consciousness, everything has to have a beginning, a middle, and an end.
That's it.
But in unity consciousness, that's not even, that's a crazy notion.
Yeah.
The idea of something having a beginning, a middle, and an end is just non-existent in unity consciousness, because in unity consciousness, everything always is always.
Unity consciousness is like a circle. There's no points. It's
That's why a circle and a straight line
linear
represent.
are two different things.
That's why in geometry, very good point, Christine. That's why in geometry, a circle represents the feminine energy, which is unity consciousness,
Yeah.
higher self-consciousness, the intelligence of the heart. And the straight line represents masculine consciousness, because a straight line has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. So it represents masculine consciousness in third dimension. Whereas a circle, you're not going to find a beginning, the middle, or the end on a circle.
Well, even like you're saying, like consciousness is eternal, but a lifespan has a beginning, a middle, and end.
Yeah.
Because your body.
But that's the illusion.
That's exactly.
The illusion that you have a beginning, a middle, and an end. That is the illusion.
It's the illusion.
Well, yeah, it's funny if you think, well, like, beginning, middle, and end. But what's, if you say, like, oh, what's between beginning and the end? But it's the
Life.
middle. The middle. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're saying, like, on a line, it's like
Yeah.
beginning, middle end, but then you're like, oh well, what's between the rest of it? What's always going to be the middle, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like an eternal cycle.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone understands what
Yeah,
I mean
yeah,
by
yeah.
that, but it made sense in my head, so I
Yeah.
thought I tried to say it. But
No, it does make sense. It does make
Makes
sense.
And the other thing that
And-
makes sense is everybody is their own consciousness straining their own perspective. Mm-hmm. So the whole concept of unity consciousness is amazing, and it definitely has to be a higher level of consciousness for everybody to put away their little, like, I'm seeing this part of it.
Yeah.
You know, there's an old story, like when I worked in a consulting firm where, like, everyone's strapped to an elephant, right? I'm sure people have heard this one before. And some guy thinks this company is horrible. The guy sitting on his head thinks it's lovely. The guy sitting on his, strapped to his foot thinks, I'm getting crapped on all the time. I think it's but the
Depends on
person,
where you are.
Yeah,
your
from the person
perspective.
far away can see what's happening. They have the objectivity. So I can't wait for true unity consciousness to land here and
that's-
open up like a big umbrella.
Well, that's the idea of the circle being representative of your feminine energy.
That's it, yeah.
Who knows it's immortal? And the
Yes.
straight line representing your male
perspective,
energy.
yeah.
Who thinks it has a beginning, a middle, who's limited, exactly.
Yeah.
Who thinks it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And of course, that is the illusion, the idea that we have a beginning and a middle and an end, because the truth is that we are immortal. And that is the goal of the mystery school. That's the knowledge that the Atlanteans had. Of course, that's what became corrupted, but and knowledge of highly advanced information and technology, which when fallen becomes dangerous because it becomes something rather than unity consciousness. It's used against people. So
The Matrix.
we're moving into a time, and you know, the Lionsgate portal, of course, is a huge energy influx now, as we mentioned, to an opening to that higher consciousness. And all of these portals all over Earth that are marked by the sacred sites, don't forget that these are the original points on Earth that were marked by these ancient people to show us that this is where heaven and earth meet. So they're actually portals, Stargate portals. Each site is a Stargate portal, apart from being an ascension machine, but that's another podcast and for another day.
Yeah.
So I think we'll wind it up for now, and you know, you probably won't get to hear this for the Lionsgate, but
If you do.
afterwards you'll be listening to it and enjoy the energy, and I look forward to talking to everybody again soon. So just for now, we're going to say goodbye, and goodbye from myself, goodbye from
Goodbye, everyone, from Christine.
and
Goodbye from Charlotte. That's
okay.
me.
And thanks a million.
Sending you
Talk
love.
to you again soon. Thanks for listening.
Connect up to your
Bye.
lineage. Bye.